Hey, what's going on, everyone? I've been doing some videos, just kind of giving some thoughts and reflections on all the books that I've read in a certain category or genre. And in this one, we're going to talk about the 17 works of science and or nature themed books that I read in 2025. I've already done a history one. If that's more your thing, definitely check that out. And if you want to do me a favor, definitely check out my journalism and current affairs one, because that one was absolutely DOA. But anyways, be that as it may, let's just go ahead and talk about these. And also, if you want to do some buddy reads with me during the year in 2026 with science books and stuff, definitely check out my science Discord as well. I'm going to start coming to cobble something together for that in the next, hopefully next week or so. Anyways, and these are in alphabetical order, and we have Ahab's Rolling Sea by Richard King. This was a fun read. It ended up somehow becoming a buddy read with a group of friends that I try to read 2 or 3, 4 books a year just as a group with them. I don't know exactly. I think Moby Dick was somehow like in the ether, and then someone else actually recommended this one. I was like, oh, sure, that's like kind of a natural history book. This one's pretty cool too, because it's it's not only autographed, but the autograph has a little doodle and everything, which I thought was pretty cool. Just happened to find it in one of my favorite used bookstores. So anyways, for $5 you can't beat that. And what this is sort of a commentary on Moby Dick in a way. Each chapter is dealing with a different topic. For example, why did Melville not talk about bioluminescence when that was all the rage in the mid 19th century, when the different algae and things in the sea stir up with oars, or when the boat drifts through it and it'll glow in the dark and everything, and everyone was writing about it, but he didn't for some reason. And he argues pretty convincingly that he actually already did that 2 or 3 of his other books right before this one, and it might have just been a little bit overplayed. But you get some commentary on the cetacean chapter, which I think is chapter 2 or 3 in Moby Dick. So you get lots of different stuff like that, talking about different fish, whale migration, for example, giant squid, just a chapter on baleen and sharks and all kinds of different stuff. Ambergris. It's just really fun. It was like I said, it's literally just you're reading Moby Dick and you're I want to learn a little bit more about that, and it's probably in here. So it was a lot of fun, kind of history, but like I said, it was kind of a lot of natural science stuff as well. Then we got Jennifer Ackerman's Birds by the Shore. So I've also read her Birdway and The Genius of Birds, and I do think I like those two better than this one. This one was still really good. It was a memoir-ish kind of dealing on the Atlantic coast, the different kind of birds that she would encounter, but kind of incorporating different life events and stuff in it as well. I definitely like her. I do love her writing style and everything. And she has a new-ish one. I think it's maybe a year or 2 old now. What the Owl Knows, that I need to get for sure. And then I'll have all 4 of her bird-related books read. And like I said, if you want just kind of a nice, easygoing, just kind of, I wouldn't say travelogue, but like I said, kind of a memoir, vignette book themed around birds in a way, this would be for you. Next up, I have an autographed book by Richard Dawkins here. Books Do Furnish a Life, Reading and Writing Science. And this was a Christmas gift, I want to say either birthday or Christmas a couple of years ago, so I finally got around to it. Not as cool, no doodle and stuff in that one. And what this book is a lot of it's Dawkins doing a commentary on his own not essays, they're where he does either book reviews of other science works, or kind of tangentially related stuff that he's interested in, or when he does a prologue or a preface to a book, and how he thought this book was so good, and he wanted to do the preface, or was asked to do the preface, and kind of explain why he did it and what he was thinking while doing so and everything. So it's a very odd kind of book. And then there's also interspersed a few different each section has a I don't want to say an interview, but kind of almost a podcasty kind of conversation with a different scientist. One, for example, is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Oh geez, I might as well just read them off, because I'm gonna forget off the top of my head. Let's see, Steven Pinker, I remember. Christopher Hitchens, Lawrence Krauss, and Matt Ridley and Adam Hart Davis. So I knew like 4 or 5 out of the 6 there. So just kind of fun, like kind of having those interspersed for each kind of major theme. That was a lot of fun. Like I said, it's just an odd book because, you know, the vast majority of the book is really just his stuff that he's already written for other people's books or like reviewing their books. So I don't know, it was kind of interesting. Okay, so next up we have Rob Dunn's The Call of the Honey Guide, What Science Tells Us About How to Live Well with the Rest of Life. And this book is all about kind of the interdependence that Homo sapiens has with a lot of the rest of the world, and just kind of different mutualisms that have developed over the millennia between humans and other species. I've read one other Rob Dunn book, but this one was really good. I think I actually did do a book review, an individual video review of just this one. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this one, he does a really good job kind of trying to, as much as you possibly could, putting you in kind of the Umwelt into like the mind, or I guess whatever the closest cognate is there for certain organisms. For example, yeast. He does quite a few times, putting yourself in the shoes, the metaphorical shoes of like yeast, for example, but other species, and seeing like what is life like actually from like their perspective. And like with the case with yeast, they are like sort of a dominant sort of species that might have we talk about domesticating, wolves into dogs and more like docile cattle and everything. Yeast might have, sort of domesticated us in a way to have like a preference for like alcohol and everything like that. But also in dealing with, like I said, we have mutualisms with a lot of like, like livestock species and stuff, and he kind of tries to say, we should like redefine like what a successful mutualism is, because yes, we've done well to help them like have tons of numbers. They are like the other dominant species like on the planet. I think it's like 90+% of like all like vertebrates are essentially humans and like the livestock. So yeah, they're successful in that way, but we should really be trying to redefine it in like quality of life for both species and stuff. Found it really fascinating. Definitely check this one out. Then we have The Darkness Manifesto by Johann Eckloff, on light pollution, night ecology, and the ancient rhythms that sustain life. And I find this topic really fascinating. This was the first book I've seen on it. I've watched a couple documentaries on like light pollution and just kind of like, wildlife at night and everything. I just find it really cool. I live in fairly far north, so during the winter months we have like 18 hours of darkness and stuff. It sucks when you you go to work in the dark and you come home in the dark and everything. But so I do find it interesting, and this is all about just a bunch of different like ecosystems and creatures and different organisms and stuff that dominate the nighttime hours, and how do they get around, how do they do it, and how are they affected most importantly by our presence through, like I said, light pollution and cities and things like that, and what can we do sort of about it going forward. Then we have a book that I did mention in the history video, but it's definitely also like a science book. We have A History of Biology by Michel Morange, and this is, like I said, it's not really a textbook, but it's just kind of a comprehensive history of the different eras of the life sciences from ancient times down to through the 20th century and stuff. So I found it really interesting. I just find learning about different scientists from different eras, kind of what they thought and kind of what their even if they were incorrect, what their paradigms were and why they thought that way. And then the people kind of like breaking through and kind of moving, like kind of progressing forward with just kind of new foundational knowledge and stuff. Really, really good. The first half of the book is mostly like, big kind of epics. Like, we have the ancient, medieval, early modern and stuff. And then each chapter is kind of roughly a century. And then once he gets, I think around 1850, 1900, it's like every 50 years, but also topical just because so much is going on. I mean, I thought it was a little dry, but not as dry as I guess as I was expecting for a history of biology quasi textbook translated from the French. So if you're into like kind of like the historiography of like a science, that's actually a really fun one. Then we have David Attenborough's Ocean, Earth's Last Wilderness by Colin Butfield. And definitely go check out the documentary if you haven't already. I love David Attenborough's stuff just in general. Love his narration, love the documentaries, love like, oh geez, how many books? I think I've read like 5 of them now. Not all of them, but quite a few. This one has quite a few like lovely plates interspersed throughout the book as well. Always like a good time there. But the thrust of the book is how oceans have probably the best capacity to kind of start turning things around in a timely manner. So if we actually were to give them a chance to do so, we would probably, it's like kind of the biggest bang for the buck kind of situation. And just like how quickly it can regenerate its own like kind of ecosystems and resources and stuff. And, just different societies and like island cultures and stuff that are, taking that full throttle and trying to do the best they can and everything. But also like really discouraging stuff such as with like the deep ocean, like mining, trawling things that are kind of trying to like take off and everything, where we haven't even studied like most of like the ocean floor yet. And they want to like, just like absolutely ravage these ecosystems by, just dredging them and stuff and whatnot. So be prepared for that as well. But if you like David Attenborough, check this one out as well. Then we have a surprising one here. Like, I thought this one was going to be kind of another run-of-the-mill, just nature book on, insert your taxa here. We have The Secret Lives of Bats, My Adventures with the World's Most Misunderstood Mammals by Merlin Tuttle. This actually was really good. Like the first chapter and stuff, I thought, oh no, this is gonna be kind of like a machismo. Like, here's all the cool stuff I did, and caving and all this kind of stuff. No, I'm glad I kept reading. This was fantastic. Obviously, I'm a sucker for the hidden life of, or the secret life of, insert plant or animal, in the blank spot there. But you learn tons about bats, and a lot of it is actually his sort of outreach into different communities, whether that's in the United States, but also like South America and Africa and stuff, where bats, are seen as like not invasive, as like a pest species, eating the fruits, and things like that, and causing a lot of damage. But actually, a lot of times they're eating a lot of the insects and stuff that are causing a lot of the pathogens to spread throughout like orchards and vineyards and everything like that. But it was kind of interesting too, where he's like apparently he's like he's like the world's like leading like bat photographer as well on top of that. And it was kind of really interesting seeing the behind the scenes on how he would have to capture a bat or a couple bats, bring him to a hotel room out in the middle of the Serengeti or the savannah or whatever, and just kind of remake the whole ecosystem like in his room, just to get a couple of like bat shots for like National Geographic and stuff. But it's really cool just seeing like the research he did kind of behind the scenes, the photography stuff behind the scenes, and like I said, just kind of the local outreach I thought was really well done. You learn a lot about bats, how they're important, but also like just about them in general as well. Can't go wrong there. And then in a very, very similar vein, we have Slither, How Nature's Most Maligned Creatures Illuminate Our World by Stephen Hall. See, what did the bat say? Misunderstood mammals, and then most maligned creatures. So anyways, this is a book, as you could probably tell, all about the taxa of snakes. And pretty much anything you want to know about snakes, you're going to learn it. You learn about, how do they move? Apparently they have like 6, I can't remember, I think it's like 6 or 7 different modes of locomotion, and how like the sidewinders doing the S thing is actually like one of the most like efficient ways for something like that to move. And how they try to like redevelop like develop robots to kind of emulate that movement and stuff for like certain kind of like rescue missions and stuff. You learn about their venom, their different other adaptations, such as like kind of their like way to go into torpor and stuff. But also, like, one I didn't realize is where some of these like larger snakes, where they can go, the majority of a year with only like one meal. Apparently, a lot of their organs and stuff just kind of atrophy like afterwards, and then just like rapidly super like regenerate when they're needed, when the snake makes a kill and just eats something whole, and how there's a lot of like research into like cancer and different other like kind of medical issues based on like kind of the properties with this kind of like just absolute like turbo metabolic growth and everything. Super fascinating, awesome book. All right, so now we're going on to kind of like a philosophy of science work, and it is Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And this is like a seminal work on the whole concept of how does science progress. It was really good. He did. I thought this was going to be a little bit kind of stuffy and dry, but important. It's kind of honestly what I was thinking going into it. Kuhn does like a really great job showing like just down to earth, real life. It's not even really an analogy. They're just like examples. Like for example, like the study of electricity. He's like, here's like the foundational stuff they had, and and this is like what people thought, and this is why they thought that. Kind of like when I was talking about the history of biology and everything. And these are kind of like he's the one apparently who made paradigm shift like a colloquial term. It was like technically it was a word even before him, but like no one ever like used it, and now it's just like a term people just use for all kinds of things, because of this book, which I thought was actually really cool, kind of as like a side tangent there. But anyways, he kind of shows this is like this is like the life cycle of like a big kind of a paradigm of science and everything, and this is how it like falls apart, and this is like kind of like when you have the stress and crises and everything, and this is how it breaks away, and that's how it's not like just super like linear growth. It's very kind of big step incremental and everything. Thought it was really well done. Probably didn't do it a very good service explaining that, but there you go. Next up was kind of a nice comfort read, and it is 12 Trees, The Deep Roots of Our Future by Daniel Lewis. And this is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a chapter on 12, 12 different tree species, each get a chapter, kind of what you learn about them, their kind of ecology, their adaptations, what makes them cool, but also, almost every chapter you kind of learn about their kind of cultural impact that they have on their region of the world, whether that's, for like leisure, whether that's for food, or whether it's for like exploitation, for like wood resources and kind of like geopolitical stuff and everything. So just like I said, just a really nice comfort read. You just want to read about trees and stuff. I don't know. May I do that? I don't know if other people do that. I think nature readers know what I'm talking about. So anyways, definitely check that one out if you like trees in any way, shape, or form. Then we have a reread here. We got Under the Sea Wind by Rachel Carson. This is her first book in the Sea trilogy. And these came out before Silent Spring, and this kind of actually shows how she had literary chops. Like, I love Silent Spring, but it's definitely not like, a work of like great literature in the sense of just like the prose and stuff. There's just a lot of, there's a lot of data and facts and like referring to studies and everything. But like Under the Sea Wind is, like I said, it's very lyrical. It's totally, you don't feel like you're learning, but like all the vignettes and all the little like stories of the animals doing their thing is based on like empirical evidence and observation and stuff. It's just really, really cool to read. Can't wait to read the other two, The Edge of the Sea and The Sea Around Us. All right, now we got probably my favorite science author. I'll go out on a limb there and say Carl Safina is. We have The View from Lazy Point, A Natural Year in an Unnatural World, which I think is his second or third title. Geez, this is probably what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least the fifth one anyways, that I've read. And this is all about, he had like kind of his like little cabin at a place called Lazy Point, and it's kind of just like the natural year, the natural history of the year around this location, on what he did, kind of what he sees, whether it's like the weather, different like bird migrations coming through, the fish populations that are like spawning or migrating and stuff, and the waters around him. But also his kind of like little tangents on exploring like other things. Like he goes on like a trip to Alaska to like help like study with and see some bears and the salmon runs and stuff like that. So it was just a lot of fun. He is a marine biologist who's worked on like international law for like fishing laws and stuff like that, and he got quite a bit of stuff done. And I think he runs some kind of research center as well, focused largely like I want to say like on marine biology stuff. So just really enjoy his works as well. Let's see, got a couple more here. We got When the Earth Was Green, Plants, Animals, and Evolution's Greatest Romance by Riley Black. And I love this cover. I just think it's like the black and green with the little dragonflies. Very like top notch, whoever designed that one. And this is all about learning about different past ecosystems that have existed on planet Earth. Just kind of really fun, kind of going through time, seeing the different things. Probably the one that stuck with me the most is like like kind of the symbiosis between like kind of the origin-ish of catnip and like some big cats and stuff, for example, back quite a few millennia ago and stuff. I thought that was pretty interesting. But like I said, if you like it's not just dinosaurs and stuff. It's kind of like all over the place throughout Earth's past and whatnot. But I think if you like fossils or any kind of prehistoric life, ice ages, things like that, definitely give this one a look. Then probably like my number 2 or 3 favorite science author is Bernd Heinrich. This one is White Feathers, The Nesting Lives of Tree Swallows. He's really cool. I live in Maine, and he lives in the middle of like the woods of Maine as well, in western Maine. I used to teach. I think he went between like Vermont and his like cabin, off the grid in the woods and stuff. But like E.O. Wilson said, like he was like one of I think E.O. Wilson basically said, Heinrich is like one of his like only equals as far as like biological scientists or something like that. Anyways, what's really cool is Heinrich did a lot of his experiments literally just kind of like on his property, like in his backyard and everything. Probably most known for his like Raven stuff, Raven intelligence and everything. This one, I'm not gonna lie, was a little bit dry because it is basically his almost like scientific like experimental like observations with tree swallows and stuff on his property. I feel like it's a very small niche of people that would enjoy it. Like I enjoyed it, but I'm like looking back on, I'm not quite sure who else kind of like enjoys this kind of thing. Like I said, it wasn't like there are like narrative kind of components as well, but like I said, a lot of it is sort of like him getting up like during like this time of the year, examining them, seeing how many roosts did well, how many houses did well, and what like the kind of ratios of success to failure was and stuff like that. Like I said, it was kind of interesting, but like I said, probably not the most readable of his works. Like a lot of the other ones have been top notch though, so don't give up on him just from this one. And then lastly, we got White Light, The Elemental Role of Phosphorus in Our Cells, in Our Food, and in Our World by Jack Lohman. And as it kind of says right there on the subtitle, this is all about the element phosphorus on planet Earth and why it's important. My big takeaway is phosphorus is probably like the biggest like bottleneck element there is on Earth, as far as like it's sort of like the limiting factor on how much flora and fauna, and I guess bacteria and protista and all that stuff, and fungi as well, that can be like on the Earth at almost like any given moment, just because phosphorus is fairly hard for life to kind of like access and harness, but it is like super critical to like biological systems and everything. I think the second half of the book, dealing with kind of the phosphorus wars, almost like with super phosphorus, with for anyone who knows about kind of the guano like geopolitical situation to create fertilizers and stuff, kind of takes over a little bit, because that's one of the big kind of uses and like kind of I guess practical applications of just like big doses of phosphorus and everything. I did find that was like interesting, but I feel like it was just kind of a little bit all over the place in that regard, but still kind of a fun read. And I felt like I did like learn a lot from it, just because I've never studied like any molecule or any atom or element, I guess, in any real depth. So like I said, felt like I learned quite a bit. So there you have it. Those are all the science kind of tangent books that I read in 2025. If you read some good science books, leave some comments down below. If you want to do some science buddy reads with me, leave those as well, or join the Discord, and hope to see you there. And always remember, whether you're reading science or not, read victoriously.